let's say 20 minutes, more or less, mota mota. So, I'm equally delighted to be here with you. And since it's Independence Day, the day after tomorrow, it's a good time to just reflect on where we are as a nation, and then look forward to where we are going as a nation. 2024 was a good year for Azadi. The election this year, the Lok Sabha election, restored our faith in the electoral democracy. And of course, an electoral democracy is crucial to being politically free, political azadi. And then the budget, after 1 month in July, reminded us of our economic freedom, because the budget showed an unusual concern. Not that it had great solutions, but it showed a concern not just for growth, but for jobs. A decent job in the formal economy is a symbol of dignity and ultimately freedom. And only when the majority of Indians can have decent jobs in the formal economy can we call ourselves a successful nation, a successful free nation. We must remember that for the first half of the life of our country, we had amazing political freedom, except for that period of the aberration of the emergency. So let's ignore that. But except for that period, we had enormous political freedom, social freedom, religious freedom, freedom of speech. But we did not have economic freedom. We had a command economy that Rajaji called the License Permit Inspector Raj. And it was because of that that these people very bravely founded the Swatantra Party. And I was very happy to be a proud member of the Swatantra Party. And I won't bore you why I became what we call a classical liberal who believes in economic freedom. But I'll just tell you that in the first 2 generations of our country, we sacrificed 2 generations of opportunities for young people. There was no hope, no scope for an entrepreneur. Today, we're in the age of startups. Zero possibility for a startup in the license Raj when a bureaucrat in an office in Delhi or a state government decided what you were going to produce, how much you were going to produce. And it's a sobering reminder to us that, well, I mean, since we are talking about this, I might as well tell you a short story. The story is, I worked for a company that made Vicks Vapor Rub. And one year there was a flu in the country, and we excuse me, there's another conversation here going on. we sold a lot of Vicks Vapor Rub. We thought we did a lot of good in a pandemic, helping children, families, at least get relief. And so we were celebrating our success when a summons arrived from Delhi, which said we had broken the law. And what was the law that we had broken? It was the licensing law. We were allowed to make only so many tons of Vicks, and we had produced 30% more. And there was a 3-year jail sentence associated with this crime. And so I was hauled up and made to sit outside a joint secretary's office. And when we arrived in his office, I say we had 2 young lawyers with me, and he was reading the newspaper. And we were too polite to say, to remind him that we were waiting for him. And he kept reading the paper calmly, enjoying himself. And finally he puts his paper down and says, "Kya?" And I said, "Kya sahab, aapne bulaya hai hame?" And he says, "Acha, tell me what is your problem?" And I showed him the summons, and so he read, and he says, "You've broken the law." I said, "Yes," and I explained to him that there was an epidemic, and we did our duty, keeping the shelves of chemist shops and pharmacies stocked with our product. And he said, "But you broke the law." And I said, "Yes, sir, we did break the law." "So you admit that you broke the law?" And he wrote down, they have confessed that they broke the law. And so he says, "You know, I want to make an example of you guys from the multinational." We were a multinational company. And he says, you think you're big shots and all, but in that we are a poor country, and I want you to know that you have to obey the laws of our country. Anyway, then he says, "Jao." So he threw us out of his office. But at the door of his office, I turned around and I said, "Sir, you know that this news will get out. It's not every day that an executive of a multinational company is sent to jail." And he says, and I asked him, "What do you think the world will think of us?" Because when the news appears in the New York Times, all over the world, that here was a company which was doing good, and you sent you sent somebody to jail for doing good. I've written a book called The Difficulty of Being Good, and here's an example of it. And so he said, "Are you threatening me?" I said, "No." I said, "People will ask that question. What kind of laws do we have? What kind of officers do we have who administer these laws? Good persons like you. What will they think of our Prime Minister?" And he says, "Jao." Anyway, I came out, the lawyers were angry with me, and they said, "You should have fallen on his feet and begged for mercy, and look at you, threatening him like that." Anyway, I had sleepless nights, but the government quietly dropped the inquiry. I'm telling you all this because you don't know. You're young people, you don't know what it was like in the first 40 years of our country's history, what it was like. Anyway, we got independence in 91, and we went on to become the second fastest growing major economy in the world after China. We lifted 450 million people out of poverty when we had hardly made a dent on poverty before 91. And plus the fact that our middle class grew from 10% to 30%. Is that a signal for me to... I don't have the time. That's why I'm concerned that I don't overstep. Anyway, the point is that for 30 years we've grown at 6%, which is amazing for a democracy. But we have not created the jobs that should have come from high growth. And the reason is that our economy has fired only on two engines: services and agriculture. Manufacturing, we have failed as a manufacturing nation. We have not created an industrial revolution. And every country that went from poverty to prosperity went through an industrial revolution. So, what can we do now? We have to create jobs. Everybody is concerned. Government does not create jobs. And frankly, during this election, it was depressing because nobody talked about jobs. I remember an interview of journalist with Rahul Gandhi, and the journalist asked him, "Sir, what are you going to do about jobs?" And Rahul Gandhi says, "Oh, I'll fill all the vacancies in government jobs." No, the reporter says, no, I'm not talking about government jobs. I'm talking about private jobs. And Rahul Gandhi scratches his head and he says, "Why are you hassling me? I'm giving 1 lakh of rupees per family." And the reporter, you could see his face say it all. Similarly, somebody asked a BJP MP about this. He says, we are the fastest growing economy in the world. We're going to become third largest. But not once did he connect, or did the Prime Minister or anybody in the BJP connect high growth to jobs and how jobs are created. So I'll take a few more moments. I wish I knew how much time I have left. Maybe I should... 10 minutes, okay. So, how do we create jobs? The government was seized of this problem, and they created an industrial policy which we know now as PLI, Production Linked Incentives. So they were going to give incentives to the private sector. And their idea was to create national champions, the way Taiwan and Japan and those companies did it, Taiwan, Korea. As a part of the Atmanirbhar program, they interpreted by and large Atmanirbhar to be produced in India, good, but not produced in India for the world, which was bad. The trouble with Atmanirbhar is you can interpret it in two ways. You can interpret it as self-reliance, which is good, but too many people interpret it as being self-sufficient, meaning that we don't want foreigners. Indians can do it. We are a big market. That is a major myth that we have amongst our policymakers, that we are a big market. Actually, we are a big country with a lot of people, but we are a very small market. You'd be shocked to see how low India ranks in terms of the size of its market for many, many products. So this is one of the first problems in this whole sphere. The second problem was that there was an obsession with our policymakers with MSMEs, small companies. Now the reality is, worldwide, small companies are suppliers to big companies. And if your big company is not succeeding, then why will your small company who is supplying it succeed? So these two myths have contributed to a very patchy record of the program, the PLI program. But there is one success story, and this success story gives us hope that if they follow this model of this success story, India can do it. And that is the story of iPhones. Apple, specifically Apple phones. Now Apple is the largest, by the way, in the world. Samsung is good, but Apple is still the largest. And Apple phones are all made in China. And China, frankly, there's a lot of disillusionment with China today. And so India is actually in a sweet spot. And this is the whole China plus one strategy, thinking in the minds of multinational companies who are all in China, to say that they should have a second base besides China. So that's China plus one. Apple thought the same way. But then it was the genius of the people on both sides who were negotiating, both the Indian bureaucrats as well as the Apple executives on the other side. In this 1 year of negotiations, they gave Apple in order to get the subsidy, Apple had to reach very large amount of sales. In other words, their existing sales would never have been able to achieve any results. They gave such a huge sales target to Apple, they would get incremental, the subsidy only on that incremental sales, so that Apple would have to export out of India. They would have no choice. Now, anyway, cut the story short, in a very short time, Apple has achieved, in the last month we read, $10 billion of sales, exports from India. They have created 150,000 direct jobs, and 70% of these are women. 150,000 direct, and they have created 450,000 indirect jobs, 6 lakh jobs. And this represents only 14% of Apple production in the world. So just look at the future. JP Morgan says, research has come out, that in the next year, fiscal 26, when the PLI scheme will be over, Apple will be at 30% of the production from India. Now you can just translate that in terms of jobs and opportunity. What I'm trying to say is, this is the right model. Frankly, I never realized that the whole electronics industry is a labor-intensive industry. It works on an assembly line. So there are a lot of opportunities. We have a good electronics minister, fortunately, who understands this. Moreover, the big jobs will come when the component manufacturers of Apple come to India, not just Apple assembly. When the components come, but they're all Chinese. So today, there's a lot of anxiety going on in the government. How do we bring these? They are Chinese, kya karenge, kaise karenge? But looks like they are swinging in the right direction, understanding that you don't cut your nose to spite your face. And so, you've got the component manufacturers coming. So what's the future? Be very selective. Don't talk about national champions. If you talk about the labor-intensive manufacturing, India's space is zero. Zero. So what kind of champions are you talking about, overnight creating? Go and target the biggest labor-intensive brands, labor-intensive manufactured brands, whether it's in garments, Marks and Spencer, Nike, in shoes, and you can name all the Zara and all the brands in the world. Go for the biggest, do exactly the same thing. Give them a subsidy only in terms, and measure the whole thing in terms of jobs created, and measure the whole thing in terms of exports. That is the only way. So, I think I've gone over my time, and I want to thank you for listening to me. I don't know if there is time for questions. If not, I shall thank you. And oh, there is time. Oh, great, great, great. Then we can talk about.
If you wish, you can also take questions. We still have some time.
Okay, so good, good. Maybe if there are questions, let me then stop here. I've given you an answer. I've given you really a path to the future, and a path which is going to create labor, a path which will create the jobs that we need. The jobs that we need in the future. And frankly, unless 50% of Indians are employed in the formal sector, you know, our unemployment numbers don't reflect at all the unemployment, the problem in India. The reality is people want proper jobs. They don't want to be pakora walas. They don't want to be landless labor. Half the labor in agriculture is redundant. And that's where the poor people are. And that's where low productivity is. They want higher productivity jobs, better income jobs. That's what Mr. Modi was elected for in 2014. That's what we want. And so, here's the way. Anyway, anybody for any questions?
Sorry, I came in late. I was here and I went away for some medical thing. And Mr. Das, the last 10 days have seen something happening in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
And of course, when things like that happen, Israel, something is happening, Sudan, something is happening. But what about continued coverage of, say, overall of the drainage system? You know, the
Continued coverage of what?
You know, overhauling of the drainage system in Delhi.
What system?
Drainage system.
Drainage. Sorry, I missed that word.
And this, you know, we are around in 2 months, the stubble burning will be happening again.
Yeah.
So how do we make sure that we focus, if I may broadly say, quality of life issues?
Yes.
You know, how does we tend to follow up and after a while something else takes over?
Yeah, yeah. Well, this of course is the basic problem, the basic issue of news. Taza khabar, breaking news. And so we chase headlines based on breaking news. I talked before you arrived, Anurag, I was speaking about the real quality of life issue, which is jobs. Now, drainage is a problem of jobs, obviously. I think that Hardyal said that the newspaper is the first draft of history. And yes, it's a first draft, but responsible, I can tell you, I can divide the newspapers, and there are very few who qualify, who care not only for the news of yesterday, but their opinion pages, their op-ed pages reflect concerns, continuing concerns. I won't mention them, it won't be polite to say who, so few, there are so few. So it's really also the reader who has to want that news. You know, the reader also wants just a bit to be a little relaxed and to pause and think about once in a while the drainage, not only during the monsoon, but remind the MCD or the state government about clean air in Delhi, not just at the time when air goes bad. So these are obviously these are concerns, and the concern I'm talking about, frankly, jobs, is a concern for the whole next generation. And the problem also is politics. that while we are talking about the next generation, they're talking about next election. And so there's a mismatch that, you know, a newspaper is a 2020 match. And the problem we're talking about is a test match. Politics is a test match. I mean, politics is a 2020 game. And the big question, Anurag, you have raised is a test match. So I think both we as consumers of media have to also remind the media that we are not just interested in today, yesterday it was Bangladesh or Vinesh Phogat or whatever. These are important issues. But that we won't forget Vinesh Phogat after a week. We won't forget her for a whole year. She's the real hero of our country. And so it's up to us also, because the newspapers respond to us like politicians respond to us. If water and clean air become issues at elections or schools, how badly the schools are run, if that becomes an election issue, the politician will also respond. Okay, so Anurag, I think that's a quick answer or a long answer for you.